weather is nice in Zurich or wherever you may be. Here it's absolutely beautiful because it's autumn now. So the monsoon is finished. So the skies are very translucent and everything is very nice as we prepare now for winter. So these are the questions. So I will take them in order, and it may be some of my answers don't answer your questions. So then please forgive me. I'm sorry. So first of all, from Caroline and Tenzin. My daughter, who is 13 years old, asked, what would happen to the living beings if the planet Earth would be completely destroyed? Can they still reincarnate? Well, according to the Buddha Dharma, at least in the Pali Canon, the Earth goes through cycles when it emerges, stays for a time, and then is destroyed. And then there's a kind of black period when this particular part of the universe is empty. Then, because of the karma of the beings, it starts to come together again and starts a new cycle. So it's always the idea of a cyclic occurrence of the coming into being, staying, being destroyed, a time of inactivity, and then it all starts again. And in that time when there is no earth as we know it, then all the beings who were on the earth are reborn into the various spirit realms. I mean, we're not just this physical realm with animals and humans, but also there are many, many levels of beings that we cannot see. Various spirit realms, heavenly realms, lower realms. And so during that time, that intermediate time when there's no actual earth to be reborn into, then beings, according to their karma, are reborn in these various other realms of being. So then they wait there until the time comes when the earth is ready to receive beings, living beings, back again. And then they begin to get reborn back again. So that's how it is. It's the consciousness remains. I mean, the consciousness, just because the earth has disappeared for a time, doesn't mean that the consciousness of the beings who inhabited the earth have terminated. They are still going on, but they have to go into other realms of beings which do not depend on a physical basis. So therefore, there are many, many dimensions. I mean, the dimension that we experience is the most gross. And there are so many more subtle levels that we can get reborn in. So that's, in short, the answer to that one. We have to stick around, that's all. And then the earth and the whole universe is created by the karma of the beings who inhabit it. I mean, we are co-creating it moment to moment, and we experience it in accordance with our karma, so that different beings living on this planet experience what their reality in different ways, depending on, you know, their senses and their kind of brain capacity and the karma which they have created. So it's all very fluid. It's all very, it's not set and static the way we experience it. Actually, how we experience it is part of our delusion, that we don't see things how they really are. So, question 2, what makes the wish to become enlightened in order to help all sentient beings so different from the worldly concern of wanting to be important and meaningful? Well, the whole point of bodhichitta, it's so incredibly vast and so incredibly impossible. I mean, there we are in all our ignorance, vowing that from now until enlightenment, no matter how many millions of lifetimes that may take, are coming back again and again purely out of compassion for all sentient beings in order to gain that wisdom which can actually liberate them. I mean, it's so vast, it's literally mind-blowing. And that's the point. It's not like, you know, just in our daily life, we try to do the best we can and we want to help people and we have our goals, our worldly goals. This is beyond anything we could possibly imagine, that we take on the commitment to endlessly return out of compassion in order to gain the wisdom and the knowledge to be able to actually benefit all sentient beings, not just human beings, 7 billion of us as there are, but all the zillions of animals, fish, birds, insects, all the beings in all the realms, all the spirit realms, in the hell realms, in the celestial realms, all beings. And at the same time, as the Diamond Sutra tells us, the Vajrachetika, we vow to save all these zillions of beings, but at the same time, there are no beings to be saved. Because the whole problem is that we believe in a living being. And so actually there are no living beings because all is emptiness. So therefore, while we are vowing to save all beings, at the same time, there are no beings to be saved and there's no one to save them. So you're playing with this the whole time. I mean, it's literally beyond thought. So it's very different from having worldly ambitions, even if they're good, well motivated. This goes beyond the ego. The ego is the last thing the ego wants to do, is to keep coming back and trying to save all these hopeless sentient beings when they can't even save itself. I mean, this goes far beyond anything the ego could possibly consider. And that's why it's so powerful. That's why it completely transforms, because then we recognize that everything we are doing is for the sake of all beings, even when there are no beings to have their sake for. So this is the culmination of our wisdom and compassion, the two coming together. And that's why bodhicitta completely, it's like if you're on a journey and then your GPS is set for enlightenment for all sentient beings, then no matter where we may detour, wherever we may go off track, in the end we have to come back because our GPS is set for the enlightenment of all beings. So therefore, through not just this lifetime, but endless lifetimes, as far as we can possibly imagine, we're going to reconnect with the Mahayana path and with the aspiration for enlightenment for the sake of all beings. Whether it's possible or not possible, it's there. I mean, it's the most ultimate goal we could possibly imagine. So it's very different from any aspirations which we might have on a worldly level based on our ego motivation. It is a whole different ballgame. Okay, does that make sense?
Okay, Jetsunma, could you see us now?
Yes.
Can you see us now?
Yes, I can. You're all looking a bit serious. Okay, if someone realizes emptiness, does this immediately stop karma from being created or just from being actualized at the time of death? Well, karma. Can I have no more? Karma is created by the ego, right? So this is where it connects with emptiness. So, I mean, if we have a mala and we pull one bead, then all the other beads come along with it, right? And it just goes round and round and round because it's a mala. So what is causing that when I pull one bead, all the other beads come? what is causing that is a connection with the thread. So the thread is the ego, is the idea that there is someone who actually created that action, right? As long as we think, I did this, we are caught. When we realize totally, absolutely, not just for one moment, but absolutely, utterly, there is no one to create the action. Therefore, there was no one to receive the results of the action. So that cuts the thread, and that's it. So realization of emptiness, just a glimpse of emptiness is not going to do it. It gives a momentary release. But until our mind, you know, at like the 8th bodhisattva level or something, is totally immersed in a realization of egolessness, then let's not kid ourselves. Because as long as we think I did this, whether it's a good thing or a not good thing, that I is holding together the karma. The reason why at the time of death, if we can recognize the clear light nature of the mind or the mother luminosity, then that can help to you know, dispel the grasping of the ego. Can only happen again if during our lifetime we are used to seeing the clear light nature of the mind. If we don't see the clear light nature of the mind and are not habituated to it during our the time of our life, then when it appears at the time of death, we won't recognize it. So that's again why we need to, I mean, death is a wonderful opportunity, but only if we are practiced during our lifetime. Otherwise, you know, they say it's like a son recognizing his mother, but if the son doesn't know his mother, then even when the mother appears, he'll go, oh, is that what the lady, and run, right? He won't immediately, mommy, rush to her arms. So this is why we need to practice and recognize the nature of the mind while we're alive, so that when it appears in all its absolute unobstructedness, we will recognize it for what it is. But it all depends. I mean, the point with the ego is that we cannot just hit the ego and bash it up and say there's no ego. Because who is saying there is no ego? The ego, right? So, I mean, who is going to walk the path? The ego. I mean, I think this is very important because sometimes Westerners especially get it all wrong. And the minute they think they do anything or enjoy anything, they start bashing themselves up because they think, oh, this is my ego clinging, this is ego cherishing. But actually, if we look at what the Buddha said, back to the Buddha, first of all, he taught shamatha. Shamatha gets the mind calm, clear, and attentive, one-pointed. In other words, the psychic faculties are all very well balanced. The mind is very healthy to get into a state of shamatha. If it's not healthy, it cannot go into shamatha. And at the same time as having a very healthy, well-balanced mind, he said we should cultivate the qualities of loving kindness, compassion, empathy, pathetic joy for the goodness, and impartiality. So who are we? And he said, you start with yourself. Well, we are not sending loving kindness and compassion to our ultimate nature. We're not sending that to our Buddha nature. Who are we sending it to? We are sending love and compassion to our poor little ego. Think about it. That's the one that needs our love and our compassion. We need to make friends with ourselves. All right? Because we need a healthy, happy, well-balanced sense of self to walk the path to the dissolution of the self. If we are at war with ourselves, we're putting ourselves down, we're undercutting ourselves the whole time, we cannot walk the path. Even Shantideva says that while pride, arrogance are, you know, klesha, are afflictions. Self-confidence is essential. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in our ability to walk the path towards selflessness. So it's very important. The Buddha said, start off, the word maitri or metta means to be a friend. So first we have to make friends with ourselves and encourage ourselves to walk the path. Just saying, I have no ego, or I am mere self, and beating ourselves up is just the ego. Do you understand? I mean, it's the ego saying there's no ego. That's not going to help. We have to realize it, and we can only realize it by walking on the path. So this whole thing about ego, 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 but in the beginning, we start by having a healthy, happy, friendly sense of self, which is wanting to walk the Dharma route, eventually to its own dissolution. And it understands that because it's a happy, healthy sense of being. Do you understand? Otherwise, I mean, you meet any of these great teachers, they're completely at ease within themselves. Otherwise, you just end up being on a guilt trip. And I never met any Tibetan on a guilt trip. It's part of the Christian Judaic way of looking, you know, and that's not what Buddhism is about. Anyway, let's get on. Oh dear, where are we? To realize dependent arising and suffering is to attain the realization of renunciation. What's the practice that leads to generate renunciation? For example, one already sees a tremendous suffering. Does this person have to understand and see dependent arising? Or if one sees dependent arising, does this person have to engage in practice to see suffering? Well, renunciation just means that we get weary of samsara. Often that is helped by seeing that samsara is inherently unsatisfactory. So there's a lot of emphasis on the sufferings of samsara and the recognition that we are all in a prison house of samsara. So the point is how to get out from that prison house, whether we're up on the upper floors or down in the dungeons, we're all in prison. But real renunciation isn't a matter of giving up something that, you know, actually we really like, but we have to give it up. It's like leaves in autumn. You know, in the summer, if you try to pull the leaves off, then they're very attached to the tree and they don't want to let go. You have to pull. But come autumn, the leaves just fall naturally because they've lost their attachment to the tree now. And so that's how we should be. When we practice, then gradually things which were so fascinating and that we grasped at so tightly now no longer seem so interesting, and we can hold more lightly. Because it's not the people and it's not the things which are the problem. It's our attachment. So being non-attached, being renounced doesn't mean that we are cold and distant and we don't, you know, are afraid of holding people in affection. The other side of it is cultivating loving kindness and compassion. The Buddhas have tremendous love. They have tremendous compassion. It's not that they're cold and unfeeling, but they hold gently. They don't, you know, sometimes I say it's like, you know, thinking of holding a day-old chick, a little baby chicken. then you hold it very gently, very lovingly. But if you think, oh, you're such a sweet chicken, I can't bear the thought of losing you, then no chicken, right? So we've killed the very thing that we are attached to. And that's why the Buddha said, we suffer. Attachment, the cause of suffering is our grasping mind. So renunciation is learning how to hold things with love and affection, but without grasping. So that's a matter of growing up inwardly. I mean, we were talking at lunchtime about this question of renunciation. And I said, it's like when you're a small child, you have toys and you're very attached to the toys. You have a teddy bear, you're very attached to the teddy bear. You love your teddy bear. Even your teddy bear is all dirty and maybe only has one eye by this time, but it's your teddy. You love it, you want it. And if someone takes it away, it really hurts. But then as we grow older, we lose interest in teddy. We don't care, we stick him in a cupboard. We have other things which are more interesting, which take up our time. So it's not that somebody took away your teddy in order to teach you to renounce. You just outgrow it. The Buddha is always talking about maturing, about growing up. And this is what the spiritual path is about. It's about becoming a genuine adult, inside, growing up. And as we grow up, we lose interest in many of the things which fascinated us before. We can still play with them, but we don't care. If we lose them, we lose them. If we have them, we have them. It's not a big deal. So then the dharma takes over. The whole point of renunciation is that we should put the dharma at the center of our lives, that the dharma should be the most that we're interested in, and that everything else, including our relationship with other people, our relationship with our possessions, our relationship with our life, is permeated with our dharma appreciation, so that everything becomes a dharma teaching for us. And then naturally, other things just fall away. It's just falling away like the leaves in autumn. It shouldn't be something which feels painful. It should feel a release, a freedom, like you've been carrying a big rucksack of rocks on our back. Now, we can let it go. We just think, it's like that. So renunciation is joyful. It's not painful. It's very important. And it's the foundation of the path, because it's where our attention goes now in a different direction. The rest of society is about accumulation and, possessing and holding tight. And this security is in grasping. And the dharma is in recognizing that genuine security is in feeling secure in insecurity, because everything's changing, everything's passing, everything's going. And then we can dance with that. We don't have to, it doesn't become something tight and intense. The dharma should make us more joyful. And if it's not making your life feel more joyful, more light, more free, then if it feels more heavy, more restricted, more difficult, there's something wrong. Especially if you've been practicing for years and years, you should be lighter, feeling better, able to allow things to just flow. And if that's not happening, then there's something wrong. You haven't understood something. We all of us have glitches, but this renunciation and bodhichitta are the foundation of the path. After that, everything else comes up very easily. Karmic connections. Experiencing countless rebirths means that every sentient being has been our mother, father, friend, enemy, countless times. How is it that we have stronger or special karmic connections to some people or beings. And why is that karmic connection not in equanimity or not impartial? Because some people we have gotten more close relationships with and other people we didn't. Or maybe if somebody was our mother, maybe that was a million lifetimes ago. We've kind of forgotten. Or maybe that was our mother when she was a trout and she had millions of little babies, you know. So, yeah, yes, it was our mother, but, you know, so some people we have had very special karmic connections with, maybe through many lifetimes, and others it's just been passing in the night. And, you know, so different people, some people you meet them and you feel that you've always known them. Other people you don't feel any particular karmic connection. If we have had so many lifetimes, then, you know, who knows when we were connected with all the various beings and in what state we were when we were connected with them. So that's why. But the idea is just that to recognize that at some level, at some point in one lifetime or many, we have been interconnected with all beings. And therefore, just as we care for our family and loved ones in this lifetime, in past lifetimes, likewise, we had that same affection for others who now appear to us to be strangers. It's just a matter of helping us to feel this interconnection with all beings, that we're, you know, ultimately, if we could only see there are no strangers or those who are close, that we all have this interconnection with all beings, and therefore the aspiration to be ultimately of benefit to all beings, whether or not we feel a particular connection with them in this lifetime or not. And we see so limited. I mean, our view is so tiny, and we cannot see the whole picture at all. I mean, sometimes I say it's like, you know, if we're weaving a tapestry, then we are, first of all, we're on the wrong side, so we're all seeing all the loose ends, and also we only see this much. And then we have no idea. If we could turn around and step back and look at the whole tapestry, we would see how everything is interconnected and how all that weaving depends each stitch on the other stitches. But we can't see that. We don't see the pattern. So therefore we judge by just this very, very small, narrow perspective which we have in this lifetime. This is one of the points of the Buddha's enlightenment, was that his mind just opened up to embrace the whole pattern back in the past and also throughout the universe. From Talia, on equanimity. It feels like equanimity is one of the most difficult practices for immeasurables. Seeing all beings have been our mothers is difficult. How do we overcome this obstacle in order to see the interdependence of our existence and cultivate equanimity? Well, you know, we were dealing with that just a little bit. The important thing, I think, if you don't want to think of all beings as being your mother, is to recognize that, first of all beings are caught like we are in the prison house of samsara. All beings are suffering. I mean, if it's not one thing, it's something else. I mean, any person that you meet, they start off okay, but within no time, they're talking about their problems, their anxieties, their worries, their troubles. I mean, we are all united in being caught up in the prison house of samsara. And at the same time, we all inherently have Buddha nature. So we all inherently have this potential to awaken. And our essential nature is not different. It's like, you know, if you think of the ocean, then, you know, if we're a drop in the ocean, then we are just part of the ocean, but at the same time, we are also the drop. So we only see the drop, we don't see the ocean. And that we all actually share the essential nature, that we are not really separate. It's our delusion which thinks we are separate. So in order to try to get this sense of our interconnection and our gratitude to all beings, The Tibetans talk a lot about beings being our mother. But if that doesn't work for you, then just think that, you know, we are all together and sharing in this prison house of samsara, which we are locked in. And at the same time, each of us has the key to get out, but we don't know where the key is. We're looking in the wrong places because we don't see that it's actually within ourselves. Each one of us has the potential to awaken. That is what's so tragic, that we have this incredible potential and we don't realize it. We don't actuate it at all. We just live on such a small level of our total consciousness. How sad, because everybody suffers as a result because of our delusion. And that we share. We share our delusion, but we also share our potential for awakening. So everyone that you meet, you can think, but there is a potential Buddha. May they be well and happy. It's so easy. We're all trapped together, but nonetheless, the potential for liberation is just there, right there. If only we could see it. And it's the same potential for all of us. It's not like some have more potential than others. All nature of the mind is nature of the mind. That's why it's compared to the sky, because you can't divide the sky. Sky is just sky. Space is just space. And that we all have, but we don't see it. That's the tragedy. We don't know who we really are. And so we identify with our little ego, which is delusion in person. You know, it's just, that is delusion. How sad. But at the same time, the potential is always there. And it doesn't take eons and eons to awaken the potential. Like that, you can get it if we turn the key. On compassion. It's sadness criteria for cultivating compassion. How can one not be overwhelmed and still remain enthusiastic when he or she truly sees suffering everywhere? Well, I mean, you know, in Buddhism, compassion, of course, is united with wisdom, which means to see things how they really are. The problem for many, many people, especially people in the caring professions, is that they take in all this suffering, but it just sits there inside them like this heavy rock, and they burn out because they don't know how to, taking it in, how to release it, which is the work of wisdom. I think a very good example would be His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who, you know, endlessly people are coming from all over the world to tell him their sorrows and the sorrows of their people, because they recognize that he will understand, you know, being the head of the Tibetan people. And so they're always coming from everywhere to tell him about their own suffering. And when he hears them, he cries. I mean, the Dalai Lama never heard that big boys don't cry. He always cries. He weeps and weeps, and his heart just overwhelms with empathy and compassion. After who is Chenrezig. But then 5 minutes later, he's joking and teasing them, and they start laughing. And, you know, by the time they come out, they're grinning away and feeling like they've taken this big stone and put it to him, and he's just taken it and dissolved it for them. The Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are all smiling. Have you noticed? Right? They're not, they're, because they have wisdom that can take the compassion, see the suffering of all beings, but doesn't solidify it. They have the ability to release it. It's very, very important to release it. And this is why also practice and meditation is very important, to be able to, as with Tonglen, right? You take in the suffering, but then you release the infinite goodness and light and love which is within us. The darkness doesn't sit inside us. It immediately transforms. And so yes, we have empathy with beings. And when they, we hear the suffering of beings, our heart opens towards them. That's very, very important. But it doesn't just stay as heavy darkness. That doesn't help anybody. And that it's very important to learn how to release and how to transform that compassion into a bodhisattva's courage, that they will dispel the sufferings of the world, not just sit there feeling, overwhelmed by the suffering. Plus the recognition that this is samsara. The Buddha never said samsara was a joyride. We have to accept that the very nature of samsara is unsatisfactory, as long as we don't see it as it really is. As long as we are viewing everything from the point of view of our small ego, we're going to see trouble. Right now we're doing a kind of program based on the bardos. And today we were dealing with dream, and how during daytime we should say to ourselves, this is just a dream. When we're asleep, then we can recognize that it's about lucid dreaming. So when you're asleep, you recognize that, the point is to recognize a dream as a dream. But the reason for recognizing while we're asleep that the dream is a dream is so that during the day, we can carry that over and realize that this is also just a dream. We're projecting it continually. We're co-connecting. We think everything out there is so real and so solid, and that we're so real and so solid. And of course, as you know very well, this was the Buddha's great insight, that things are not the way they seem to be. And that actually what appears to be so self-existent from its own side is very largely our own projection. So as our mind becomes more purified, likewise, our projections become more purified. And as our minds are more tainted, therefore our projections are also more tainted. So it's like that. But samsara is a problem, until we recognize that samsara is nirvana. And we can only recognize that when we recognize the nature of the mind. So at the end of the day, what we all have to do is to recognize that level of non-dual awareness. Mostly our awareness, even if we have it, is dualistic, I and other. But at the fundamental level of our mind, of our Buddha nature, there is that whole dichotomy between the two just dissolves. And there is just being without having to divide into, the object and subject. And the nature of the mind is by its very nature, love and compassion, as well as wisdom. We don't have to fabricate it anymore. That's our very nature. So every time we feel compassion arising, it's because we're activating the very deepest level of our being. So that's a good thing. Because the fundamental nature is compassion and wisdom. So the more insight, the more compassion and feeling we generate, the closer we are getting to our true nature again. But that compassion has to be united with wisdom. We have to see that it's not something solid and self-existent, but something very open and spacious, which is the wisdom aspect. Am I making any sense here? You're all looking very serious. Anyway, on meditation. As we get older, we experience more sickness, and we can use the discomfort of physical suffering as the object of meditation. However, can one still meditate when suffering from dementia or in a coma? basically, I would say no. Of course, we do not know what is the state of mind of someone in a coma. It might well be that they have a very deep level of awareness, but that they cannot, they cannot express that. We don't really know but generally speaking, when people are in a coma, it looks on the machines that they're pretty brain dead. And in dementia likewise. So there are also times, even without dementia or so forth, people with certain psychological problems, psychiatric problems, who should not meditate. Meditation isn't the panacea for everything. And for certain people, actually, it could be very detrimental for them and create more problems for them. This is why the Buddha started by starting with shamatha, because you cannot get into a state of real shamatha unless you are psychologically well balanced. And it helps to heal the mind if one does it at least in short sessions. So it's, but for mostly if you have, really a lot of brain damage, etc., meditation wouldn't be what you could do. But if you have physical pain, sickness, and so forth, which is just physical, then of course meditation can be very useful. I mean, not only practicing, indeed, when you have a real pain, then instead of resisting the pain, to open yourself to the pain and use it as a meditation and awareness of sensation, not thinking, ow, this hurts, but just examine it with curiosity, how it feels, and allowing it to just be. It can be a very powerful meditation, actually, because it draws the mind in. And of course, Tonglen, if you're really suffering from something, then to imagine bringing in all that sickness from everybody who's suffering that sickness, that you will take on their sickness and give out the health of your fundamental nature. So many lamas, of course, when they get very ill and often on the point of dying, when people ask them what practices they are doing, very often they say Guru Yoga and Tonglen. And so in that way, actually being physically in pain can be useful on the path, because there's many ways of taking it. Also looking at it and seeing its inherent empty nature and so forth. There are many, many. Also seeing it as clearing up your karma and so forth. So, there are many ways of taking illness and pain onto the path. But one way is simply just to use it as your shamatha practice. And it's a very powerful object, actually. The breath might get boring, but your pain is right with you, From Morik. As one of the first Western Buddhist nuns managed to navigate the cultural differences between the West and the East, sort of, how these differences have affected your practice? Well, I mean, I've been around now for about 60 years. And so, I take everything with a bit of a pinch of salt. You can see where, at the very, very beginning, my Lama said to me, always recognize that Tibetan Buddhism is half Dharma and half Tibetan culture. So you can throw out the culture, just don't throw out the Dharma. But of course, it's not so easy, because it's not Dharma here, culture here. We can separate it. I mean, it's all very intertwined. And Tibetans especially don't see the difference. A lot of things which they think are very important are really just Tibetan culture. And other things, are really very essential Dharma principles. And of course, the two have gone together. Buddhism is very adaptable, as we know. Wherever it goes, it adapts itself. So you get Chinese Buddhism, Thai Buddhism, Indian Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Japanese Buddhism. And in each one, the Dharma has taken its coloring from the culture which it finds. It's very, very adaptable. And sometimes I say it's like if you have liquid, we have water in here, right? So here it's in porcelain, but then you could put it in a glass, or you could put it in a golden cup, or you could put it in a plastic bottle. But the liquid is the same. It looks different now because the outer appearance is changed, but the actual content is the same. And so this is like Buddhism. So, you know, Japanese Zen are very Japanese, even if they're in America or Europe, it's all very stark and very sitting. And Tibetan Buddhism is very colorful and exuberant and exotic, and wherever it is, they trail behind them their culture. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's not like, you know, the culture is bad, but we need to recognize whether how we fill up our water bowls is Tibetan culture. It's not Dharma. The Buddha did not carry water bowls around with him. And if you go to Thailand or you go to Japan, nobody has water bowls, right? This is a Tibetan thing. They probably got it from the Bon. A lot of Tibetan Buddhism is based on Bon. And so, I mean, you go along with it. I mean, I live here in India with the Tibetans, so you go along with how the Tibetans do it, because that if you don't, then you look like you're this kind of weird, stupid foreigner who doesn't know how to act properly. So therefore you do what, you know, when in Rome, do as the Romans. And so that's fine. That's fine. But I think as I go around teaching in the West, I think it's very important to recognize the kind of lifestyle which your audience is dealing with. I mean, a lot of Tibetan Buddhism is focused on essentially teaching monks. So you're teaching people who have renounced worldly life, are living in monasteries or maybe up in retreats. And that's the ideal. Because in Tibet, as in India, I mean, their audience is often still monks. They're the ones who understand what the Lama is talking about. And so the Lama basically is talking to the monks. Lay people are sitting on the outskirts saying Om Mani Padme Hum and wondering what they're going to eat for lunch, but with great devotion. But they don't know what the Lama is saying. What's the Lama saying? I have no idea. Om Mani Padme Hum. It's enough. But the monks will understand because they've been trained. So they're talking to monks. But nowadays, when we go anywhere, the audience is 99.9% lay people. They're lay people with families, with jobs, with social life, but wanting to use the Dharma in their daily life. Wanting the Dharma as much as the monks do, but with a different lifestyle. So you can't expect these people to act like monks because they're not monks. So therefore, you have to look at the Dharma and see where in the Dharma are things which are useful for people to use in daily life to make life lighter rather than heavier. Really, I get very worried with these lamas going around giving these high empowerments with huge commitments. And everybody ends up with all these obscure deities they have no connection with and enormous commitments, which they're terrified if they break it one day, they're all going down to Vajra hell. And how is this Dharma helping anybody? Sometimes I say Dharma is like yeast. You know, you have a big lump of dough, very heavy, but then you mix in just a little yeast with it, and then the whole thing rises. Then you can cook it and eat it and be nourished. So the yeast is like the Dharma perspective. We don't throw the dough out. We don't throw out our daily life, our families, our jobs, our commitments to society. That is the Dharma practice. If it's mixed with yeast, the Dharma yeast, then everything lightens up. The family, the job, everything becomes a Dharma practice. So that's what I think is really, really important. That's why I talk a lot on Lojong. Because, you know, how can the Dharma be helpful to make our lives easier? So some simple meditations and some real genuine bodhichitta motivation, that wishing all beings well and happy. And then Lojong practice for how to take difficulties onto the path, how to make life, you know, all the problems that we have, how to use that and not resent them, but make, you know, make our life fulfilling, because we don't have any hopes and fears. We don't hope everything's going to go the way I want it to go, and fear it's not going to go that way, because we have that inner courage of knowing that whatever it happens, we will deal with that. Then that is how to use the Dharma in a way which brings genuine meaning into our daily life. So throughout the years, more and more and more, I've dropped and talking about Tantra. I've stopped talking about all these high philosophical ideas. Get down to ground level. How to be a nice person, as the Dalai Lama says, you know, and, you know, how to have a good heart. If we can't even be nicer than other people, then what's the point? If we can't be a little bit more happy, a little more contented, a little more open, what's the point? I mean, knowing all this philosophical jargon isn't going to liberate us. I mean, it's nice to understand clearly what is Buddha Dharma, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's the heart that has to be liberated. The head, you know, full of book knowledge in itself is not going to help. So what have I learned in all this time? Well, I've learned that, you know, it all depends on our mind. So our monkey mind, which everybody has, needs to be tamed. Then when it's nicely tamed through shamatha and, you know, some Lojong practice, then it needs to be trained. Then through being trained, it transforms. And eventually, through our insight, our conceptual mind is transcended. And that's a path for anybody. It doesn't depend on any cultural accretions. It's dealing with the mind itself, our own mind. How to tame and train, transform and transcend our own mind. And for that, we need all day, and if possible, all night, through lucid dreaming. But if we don't have awareness and open, kind heart during the day, then, you know, what's the use of all these empowerments and all this philosophical knowledge and all the cleverness? It's just, I don't know, it just doesn't help. So the Dharma is very, very simple. It's all about dealing skillfully with the mind. And the point is that the Buddha Dharma has so much understanding of the mind. It's extraordinary. And that's what we have to really, really concentrate on, the mind. So here, for the last question, he says, for those who discovered Mahayana Buddhism late in life and wish to incorporate the Buddhism in our lives, what should we focus on in our practice? Well, that's it. Keep your meditation very simple, not too long, but as frequent as you can. If there is an opportunity, do small retreats, and really cultivate the ability to be aware, to be mindful, to be present in daily life as much as possible. Use all your relationships with your family, with your colleagues, with your friends, with people who are difficult, with people who are nice. Use all of that to cultivate the heart, wishing all beings to be well and happy, recognizing every single being we meet would rather be happy than to be miserable, even though they do things which make themselves miserable. But they do it because they think it's going to make them happy. So be kind, be generous, be patient, Be aware. Be present. The Dharma is very simple, but the point is we have to do it. It's not a matter of age. You can be 99, and if you meet the Dharma today, you can be enlightened tomorrow. So, you know, because our potential for awakening is always there with us. But we have to use everything for that. All our relationships, all our activities have to be permeated with the Dharma, awareness, and good heart. Then that's it. That's enough. It's easy. No, it's not easy. It's simple. Simple, not easy. But we can do. And there's no excuse. There's no excuse. Either we are aware or we are not aware. And that's it. Okay, so thank you. I think I've done well. Look, it's half past.
I'm sure we look serious, but the little butterfly.
At least you didn't look asleep. At least you didn't look asleep. So that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we hope to see you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In person in the future. If you have a chance to come to Europe, we would love to host you.
Well, good luck to all of you. Keep walking the path. That's the point. And never, as His Holiness said, never give up. Right?